Chris, how you
How are
doing?
we? You look obviously looking forward to the rugby this weekend.
If I get a chance to switch it on, then yes. Otherwise, I think it will be sort of happening in the background.
Yes, I think that's gem. I don't know who England are playing actually. Do you know, Anthony?
Let me look it up quickly.
They played so badly last weekend. I mean, it's anything. I don't think they could play any worse. It was just like
It's always so frustrating when England just so many penalties and then they can't get the game going. Like whenever they play bad, those are the two problems. When they play good, it's just unbelievable. So they're playing Italy, so hopefully not another England loss.
No, that has to be a win.
Especially France destroyed them. It was like 55 something last weekend.
let's wait and see. So look, David, nice to see you, mate. It's been a while, and you, I like the cap.
Oh, listen, this has been my go-to lockdown game. It just starts conversations. But the hair is crazy. I don't know what my hair was like when we did meet in real life, but it was not like this.
It's very Wolverine.
Yeah, well,
I was going to say Jesus.
There we go.
Well, I can't really talk on the hair front, so I'm just jealous, clearly.
Jesus for the 21st century should surely be based on Wolverine. That would get people back in the churches.
It's a whole different wrath on the non-believers.
So anyway, pray tell on there was a house move, I believe, over the course of COVID, which I imagine that resplendent bookcase is part of the new home.
So look, this is my setup. It's sort of it is a complete Zoom background. We do need bookshelves, and this is a relatively comfortable space for me to sit. We moved in the beginning of December, and I mean it's literally a ramshackle barn with dilapidated outbuildings, an acre and a half of land with an orchard, and pretty constant bonfires from me, which is keeping me busy. But yeah, I think it was the right move, but I kind of wish we had £200,000 sitting somewhere that we could just throw into this and make it what we want it to be, rather than trying to do it ourselves.
You should get in touch with Grand Designs, because I think they give a bit of money towards the overall build. I think obviously a tiny fraction of it, but and I actually had the great pleasure of meeting Kevin, the presenter, when we did a crowdfunding evening at Bloomberg, and I hosted it, and he was representing his sustainable housing project, which was really interesting, and I think going strong still. So I would do that if I was you, because you look like you have an amazing space there that if you get the plans,
exactly, I look forward
to seeing an episode on it.
I feel we'd probably be more Channel 5 with George Clark than but I think my wife used to date him, so there might be some kind of way, some sort of way in.
Or Kevin or George?
George.
Okay.
George. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Two options.
Two options. There we go. We play them off against each other. But no, listen, the reality is I've got this workshop which I'm transforming into what will be my home office and potentially sort of podcast video recording space. We've already got kind of vague plans to have some sort of spring summer get together in the field and do some sort of, I don't know, Agritech purpose driven tech for good meetup based around a bonfire.
And some local brews, I hope.
Local brews. Well, we're close to Reading, so there's actually, it's funny, I did think moving here I would be out of the tech scene, but one of my neighbors is a VP of lubricant innovation at BP. Another one is the kind of former head of global marketing for Airbnb. Like it's proper rural, but people have more strings to their bows than scrumpy and horse manure.
Birds of a feather, it seems like.
Yeah.
I think digging into some of the amazing things you've been doing in the last year at Maddyness UK. Tell us more, because I think there was the Voice podcast
Yep.
has been launched this week, which I did think of Tom Jones when I saw The Voice, but
well, like everything we do with Maddyness, it has to have sort of bilateral, like linguistic appeal, and we thought keep it simple. I'm sure there are other people who have done podcasts called The Voice, but yeah, obviously Tom Jones is on our list of people to get involved. I like to think he's probably another superstar angel investor, right?
I didn't know he was.
I'm getting this right. It is The Voice UK, isn't it? That where the chair spins.
Yeah. But I didn't realize he was so involved in Sex Tech, which is the season 1 focus, isn't it?
He is, yeah. Listen, I think we're clutching at straws there, but I imagine he's the godfather of sex tech. Yeah, well, exciting times all round, especially, and as Chris rightly says, with the launch of our podcast, which we wanted to do something engaging, insightful, and kind of disarm the guests and uncover things. And we thought, what better space to do that than in the growing business of sex tech, if only for us to try and claim what I think is a fantastic hashtag.
I think I agree with that. And then I haven't had the time yet to actually listen to episode 1, but just in short, you're doing a series, I think, on particular areas like sex tech being the first one, and then I suppose there's others to follow. What's the general modus operandi of the podcast series?
So we wanted to keep it, I suppose, quite sort of light and agile and not commit ourselves to do too much. So we thought for each season, 4 founders from one sort of loosely connected vertical. And sex tech obviously is actually quite broad, although there's quite a lot of sex toys. The idea then was really find 4 superstar founders in that space who are doing not only kind of interesting things, but that have had interesting journeys. And if you listen to the first one with Farah, the co-founder of Hanks, you'll hear what is a very interesting story, even just the kind of how to sort of articulate a slightly, I suppose, once taboo subject to investors and generate interest, and how the sort of the different reactions were for what is now a fantastic growth business with people, queuing up to invest in them.
Yeah, and a good challenger brand as well. I listened to episode 1. Is episode 2 out yet? I saw there were some teasers. I don't know if
there's teasers. It'll drop next Wednesday.
Yeah. I am subscribed on Spotify and Google Podcasts, and I noticed that we're both using Anchor as well. So shout out to Anchor.
How's the early reception been to
it's been really good, actually. I mean, we're very fortunate. So I don't think I could have put together a podcast on my own. I just about managed to set up an account on Anchor. I don't feel, as much as my role at Maddyness does cover sort of journalism, I'm not a journalist, so I don't feel I would bring too much value by me talking to people. So we're very lucky to meet Graham Hussey, who set up the Startup Van, was one of the co-founders of the Startup Van. And we just kind of clicked and thought, this was pre-lockdown. There is excitement that we want to generate around Maddyness. The ecosystem is constantly changing. There's always space for challenges, for new things. And we just sort of stayed in touch, bouncing ideas around. And I mean, I don't think a podcast is anything new. I mean, listen, everyone in this room is doing a podcast or a vodcast. And I think that's great, but we wanted to try and do something. So we wanted to, in a way, leverage Graham's success and the community that he's built with Startup Van, and sort of bring him into our world. And yeah, initial pickups looking really positive. Like everything we do at Maddyness, there is a real sort of importance given to brand and identity, and that's more than just the graphics, although they are, I think they look shit hot, but just to have a kind of a plan, right, a structure, and coming back to the structure of the voice, it's not going to endlessly be about sex tech. Sex tech is season 1. Season 2 will explore different verticals, find different founders. And it's interesting how we sort of pick out what we define as being interesting sectors. And then someone from a completely unrelated sector comes up with a fantastic story, fantastic journey and an idea. And we want to be able to respond to that sort of quickly and effectively.
Okay, great answer. And then with Maddyness, the magazine, the digital publication, you came on board there, I think, a couple of years ago, or maybe longer.
No less.
No, is it? Okay, well, that shows how good a job you've done, because I thought it was longer than that. And you know, if we have readers or viewers perhaps not so familiar with the Maddyness story, you know, it's I think a founder started business. If you can sort of give us a bit of an overview as to Maddyness, how you got involved, what you did before, that'd be brilliant.
Absolutely. So Maddyness started just about 10 years ago in France. 3 founders, now 2. Back when setting up a business in France was terrifically difficult. The idea of startups didn't really exist. Station F wasn't there. But there was this sort of burgeoning change, new technology, and has actually since come to become a real government focus for France. So Maddyness started as an online, basically as an online magazine that's real remit is to provide useful content to entrepreneurs. And that, of course, can mean a multitude of things. That can be, you know, top tools for setting up the right business administration structure, company structure, etc. That can be how to put together a pitch deck. It can be also, you know, insightful trends and what the future looks like. We're very much sort of committed to innovation and the future and technology, although we're also very open to a good sort of lifestyle business. We have it in France. We are, I'm pretty confident to say, the leading online media for startups and innovation, with huge readership, which is fantastic, but also drives my KPIs, which is daunting, but a nice benchmark to have. In the UK, we started, so I joined in September, October of 2019, at the time of general election and Brexit, and we then launched in January of 2020. So looking to do, sort of the starting point was looking to do what Maddyness in France had done to bring together the community of French startups, but to do it in the UK. Of course, 2020, the UK startup ecosystem was already incredibly well developed, incredibly vast. So we come at it sort of with more of maybe a challenger identity, trying to do things that others aren't doing, trying to do things in a different way. And of course, you know, 2020 was a great year for Maddyness in the UK. Frankly, we've told some amazing stories, we met fantastic people, and readership has grown. At the same time, it's been a really complicated time to start a business, trying to grow a team. We might touch on our anecdotal experience of getting an office. All our hopes were, let's get an office. That'll be a real flag in the ground for Maddyness. We'll have our private office and we'll get it for 5 people, even if there's only 3 of us, because we're going to grow. We got our keys on, I think, the 8th of March. And so just as the pictures were going, the posters were going on the walls, and we were getting into the swing of life in Spitalfields, it was cruelly taken away from us.
Yeah, that's a
but
shame. Oh, well, and with that in mind, will you be heading back to Spitalfields and the office at some point this year, you hope?
Yes, I have to go there next week to collect our affairs from the office, because we've cancelled the lease. 100% yes. However, I don't think any of us are going to be going back to the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 dedicated way. I think we're quite keen to see what emerging new options evolve out of this mess. It's really nice to have an office. There's the vanity thing, there's the meeting people thing, there's the chance encounters in the corridors, and there's bringing the team together, which, as good as we've all got on Slack, there is for me, a real fundamental piece missing. And that's just being in each other's company. So yes, we will revisit an office, but we're keen to see what the future options look like, right? I mean, I think, I'm a member of a club that actually closed down but is coming back under new ownership. I think options like that, when you pay £1,000 a year for a club membership and it basically gives you access to everything you need, I'd rather commit that budget to myself and my team to have that. But we'll see.
Okay, and then I think the one thing that I really enjoy about Maddyness is the article engagement. You really put some detailed thought into the actual content and the founder or the VC or the particular trend or event that you're focusing on, which, to be perfectly honest, and this is going back to my days at Bloomberg, I used to get so bored of seeing the regurgitated press release of, Bilbo Baggins has raised 25 million at the valuation of this, and these funds are in the round, which, is important, and it's a factual identity for people in the industry, and it's some call it bragging rights for others, but it's important. But with the editorial hat on, David, what would you say are the sort of ingredients that make it so good at Maddyness?
Thank you for those very kind words, firstly. What makes it so good? I suppose, in a way, we're quite sort of transparent and open with people, as much as we are reporting in a business. Everything is business related at Maddyness, but we don't sort of push that to the forefront. We're not sort of too involved with the or too interested, I suppose, in the figures and the who's joined which board. It's almost, I love that there are people sending out press releases to tell me that these companies have raised money. That there's no doubt that plays a vital role in the existence of content appearing on Maddyness. But I think, you've got to be driven by that question of, well, so what, right? So I think it's quite an interesting one when you think, for many startups and for VCs, the raise of a round or the raise of a fund is a trigger for news, but it's only a very small trigger, right? I mean, it is something that can be encapsulated in a couple of paragraphs. Doesn't necessarily warrant more than that, but if you scratch behind the surface, or if you sort of look at what that company is, or how this represents a change for that VC to be investing in this new space, that's where the kind of the story and the interest is. Something that I have no journalistic training, but I'm driven by sort of asking the question of, well, why is this important? Why is this relevant? And importantly, the startup world exists on the ecosystem, and the connections between others, right? Between the different groups. So it's always sort of trying to find those hooks into other things that we've reported on, or other things that we've seen, or even just things like, we're currently putting together a list of top podcasts to listen to. And it takes a bit of time because you could Google it, right? But actually it's way more interesting that, you know, Chris and I have been talking about this. So I've got a great podcast in your podcaster list. Sorry, I'm being attacked by Slack. Let's turn that off.
And also, if you just Googled it, you wouldn't know about the Notwix one.
Well, exactly. So I think it's that sort of...
Don't Google it for a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
It's being, you know, asking the questions, being open and seeing, you know, press releases are great, but they're just a kind of starter for 10 in everything. You know, a good press release for me should lead to lots of different content. And that's where it's so interesting in the startup space, because, you know, we position ourselves as being this kind of founder first, human centric approach. And of course, that's sort of not compatible with a kind of one shot, right? A life is a journey, a business is a journey. Startups need momentum, they need growth. So for us, I like to think that every article is kind of one chapter that can lead to the next step, which is where it gets really interesting in terms of how we sort of think of, is there a sweet spot for us talking to startups? Is it when they're trying to get legitimacy in front of investors at sort of early stages? Is that interesting? Or is it when they're looking to exit or acquire others or scaling globally? And I think the reality is it's all really interesting, but I prefer getting in early and tell the story from the beginning.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about on that Maddyness UK journey was about the recent rebrand, which we noticed and loved. Talk us a little bit through that process.
Well, that process, so that was led from France. So I'm very lucky that my kind of back office, the design is duplicated and consistent with France. There was various reasons for doing it. You know, I think any business needs to refresh, redesign. I think part of it was sort of getting ready for the future, bringing in more audio content, bringing more mixed media content, a bit of polishing, a bit of updating. Interestingly, reduction in the amount of images that appear on the home page, which I must say I really like, and we had some really nice feedback saying it looked like a kind of modern day reinvention of a broadsheet, which I thought was quite high praise. Realistically, what was it like for me? It was actually quite a lot of late nights on WordPress, speaking to our French developers on Slack with lots of misunderstandings and issues, all of which actually I was incredibly, I sort of thought, let's get, so day one, when we do the rebrand it was on a Monday, let's try and get the bare bones on the UK one, and then we'll spend a bit more time growing, fleshing out, because the French site has a bit more usability and functionality than we do in France. But we were actually able, in the space of a long Sunday, to incorporate quite a lot of those new elements onto the UK site. So it's interesting, Chris, your point about companies raising money. That is something we still report on, and we do it on our weekly Maddie Money article. But we also now have a graphic representation on the homepage, charting investment and raises month by month, which is, I think, a really nice kind of tear sheet, touch point for that information in one place, quickly and easily.
What are the sources for that chart? Which I had to look at it. It is very useful. But I think people would be curious as well. What are some of the sources that you're using to get accurate data on that?
That's a really good question. So we depend a lot on press releases. I mean, our standard, and this is where, you know, there's an editorial line. If the company's doing something really interesting, or the founders are, you know, in some way you know, different or newsworthy for us, we may pick up the story and do a dedicated article, but generally we'll take it and condense it into a sort of part of our Maddie Money. So press releases, other media, you know, we as a media, we embrace the competition, the other people out there, and we look at what they're reporting on, and we love Deal Room. So we use Deal Room a lot for finding that data, and it's a fun and beat Company's House. Company's House has a fantastic open source website for business information.
All right, and then you know, the content, the interviews, the people you're speaking to, clearly high-end people in the tech industry. What do you personally feel from maybe the editorial steering committees, looking ahead at 2021, the big picture trends? Any predictions from the magical Mr. Johnson?
I was reading a piece about whether trend forecasting is a valuable or not valuable thing. I think it's super interesting for sure. We're I suppose going at it with the same openness. We're not kind of hedging all our bets on anything in particular. However, you know, we are it's interesting because we started only in January 2020. We sort of came at issues, things like sustainability, things like diversity. We thought, and sex tech, so the idea of sort of taboo subjects and well-being as a bigger picture. Came at it thinking we don't need to change the way we're talking about these things. We just need to talk about them, continue the dialogue. It's not a kind of legacy structure that we need to think, goodness me, we're not a particularly diverse company, or actually we're not very sustainable, and make any change. We thought, actually, let's just embrace those things. And it's almost that getting over the point of these things need to be talked about, and actually just get in and talk about it as often and as in-depth as possible. And I think my point in that, in terms of trends, would be, you know, net zero, sustainability, green tech, clean tech, agritech, especially because there's some amazing things happening. I think more so in France than in the UK around agritech, which is a great sort of point of leverage, I suppose, for us at Maddyness. And yeah, tech.
Yeah. All right. Good. So you mentioned the entente cordiale between obviously your good bosses in Paris and obviously yourself here. Is Maddyness specifically French UK focused, or generally across? Are you looking across Europe? If you are looking across Europe, any particular predictions on the geographies as we move forward into 2021? Any hot spots of techiness that we need to know about?
Yeah, absolutely. So Maddyness in France is fully committed to the French ecosystem. It's something that's sort of almost sits uneasily with me, because in the UK, I'm meant to be talking about the UK ecosystem, but whereas doing sort of French for the French seems to work in France, doing sort of UK for UK seems a little bit jingoistic and maybe with negative connotations. So I try to be way more open here and on the English language platform, mainly because, you know, the genetic makeup of the UK startup ecosystem is fundamentally international and diverse. So there's that. In terms of, yeah, absolutely. So I think well, I know the plan for Maddyness is to create offices around Europe, talking to and with those local ecosystems, with a view to, you know, documenting Europe almost from the inside, so rather than one global thing, actual kind of not mini, but kind of smaller communities. For me, I heard great anecdotes of people in the startup world getting locked down in Lisbon and in Portugal. I think that's an indicator that that's an interesting space to keep an eye. I feel Belgium would be quite an interesting one because of the francophile nature. I've always loved Switzerland as a country. I don't think we're hearing enough about Swiss startups.
Especially on the crypto front as well. They seem to be always pushing that envelope.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I think you made the introduction to Radix, didn't you, for Maddyness? And I think they're based in Switzerland. And there must, I mean, the high net worths per capita in Switzerland has got to be pretty good. And then, you know, Berlin, Tel Aviv.
Okay, so thanks for those insights, David. So practically speaking, if I was a startup in Berlin or, you know, Brussels, and, you know, I read Maddyness daily, how would I get my startup in Maddyness? How do you select? How's the process work? What's the, you know, because clearly there are millions of startups being created across Europe, I'd imagine. You know, well, I don't know the actual stat, but I'm sure it is a big stat. So how do you select?
Just get in touch through the website. Increasingly, you know, engage with us on social media. I mean, it's really, let us know who you are and what you're doing. And it's like my point about putting together a list of podcasts. You know, we may not be able to do a full-on piece about you and your journey, but if you're in a space that we're writing about or thinking about, then we want to hear about you to tell people what you're doing, which is a good way of doing it, because it's then sort of more thought leadership based. It's not, everyone knows with every single startup, you are the best startup in the world ever, right? You almost don't need to tell us that. Find the angle that's related to our editorial or related to the kind of the bigger picture, and we'll always find a way of engaging with you. And of course, in that, I'd like to think the sort of the holy grail is a nice in-depth interview with the founder.
Yeah, and then I think we were touching upon an answer about how many startups are created a year in Europe. Did you have a stat for that? Because
I didn't. I was in a webinar yesterday, and I don't think he had the stat either. But apparently, there were more businesses created in 2020 than ever before, and I think it's a trend that will continue. I suppose the flip side is looking at how many of those dissolve or cease trading. But I think, you know, it seems like we said enough people during the early lockdown said, oh, well, Airbnb was created during the financial crash. And people have taken that to heart and are seeing that now as, oh, well, what a great time to start a business. It must be the moment.
Wow.
I looked up the answer while we were chatting. Nobody has a concrete answer. It's all estimates. I've just seen one that's as high as 123,000 startups created annually in Europe.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think, thank you for that, Anthony. Well, we've interestingly, we've had a few people on the podcast who have kind of given their, I suppose, view from either a VC or a founder perspective on the sort of current climate for starting a business in COVID, and it's quite mixed actually, in the sense that some are, I think, you know, picking up on something that we wrote about last year of the funder gap, that, you know, everything's really super hot in Series A, and, you know, people tearing each other's eyes out and limbs off to get involved in some of these names, that, and the rounds are getting bigger and bigger, whereas, you know, it seems there could be that funder gap which we talked about, where the guy, the garage, the lady in the garage, just, you know, that taking that risk isn't as prevalent at the moment because they've got that cozy job still at some corporate. So it's a bit, I think Leo was on earlier from Patrick from Form Ventures, and he mentioned about it. He said in their sort of that deal flow line that they get from the very early stage, it has seemed to have thinned a bit over the COVID period, that there doesn't seem to be as many people incrementally, or the kind of the barometers saying it's not as much as he thought. Although that being said, they are very UK focused, and we're obviously talking here about Europe.
I did like Ed's take on it at Albion. He said on the other side of it, you do have people now that if they didn't like their jobs before, now they absolutely hate their job because it's the only thing that they're doing. So they might be more willing to take that plunge than they were previously.
Yeah, and so you know, we also wanted to sort of dig a bit more into the QVC side of life. You're getting to know quite a few of the VCs through that. I mean,
through my wonderful connections, Chris. Thank you.
I wonder who they are. No, just sort of what sort of in a can would you say your learnings have been on the world of VC so far, and you know, your interactions there?
As a person, I sort of think, God, that would have been a good business to get into. Why aren't I doing that? Because it seems so, you know, fantastically dynamic, interesting, you know, so many of them doing the right thing, sort of betting on the right horses. What I find interesting, I suppose, it's a way, how do I put this? It's almost a kind of a sexier world than I thought it was. It's a far cry today from the stuffy world of men in wood paneled rooms with the keys to the coffers, as it were. It does seem like they are constantly upping their game, you know, to respond to and engage with startups in that sort of language, right? You know, the world of startup has its own vernacular, and I think VCs would have maybe previously been like, oh God, it's the David and Goliath. The startup has to pitch to the VCs. The way they engage today seems to be a lot more open, a lot more equal, and I see that with how well the VCs respond when we ask them to talk about their portfolio. You know, they leap at the opportunity to introduce them, to shout about them, and to further.
They all seem so passionate, which I found really interesting on doing the vodcast, especially that they love it. It is. It's the passion is just these are their babies, you know, this is their kids.
I think one of the big differences as well that kind of distinguishes VC from regular investing is regular investing, the investor is so skeptical about the entire aspect of, you know, will this work, won't this work? Whereas entrepreneurs have to be optimistic by nature, right? Especially when you're creating something from nothing. And that's where I think VC sits in the middle. Of course, they're skeptical to try to discern what can happen and what can't happen, but they do join in with the entrepreneurs and go along for that ride of what could happen. At least that's my take on it.
That's good. That's good. And then I suppose the other flip, we were naturally talking about the founder scene a lot earlier. You know, what's this sort of David's top tip for founders? You know, clearly you've seen a lot, you're engaged or introduced to a lot. You know, any sort of no-nos or any kind of like, you should do more of this, which would be good to share?
Yeah, listen, I think it's probably a truth I learned myself when I tried to launch, well, I did launch my own business that then failed. And I think where I went wrong was trying to do everything myself and not really wanting to almost share and talk to people about it. And I sort of think it's not that it was a particularly unique or novel idea, far from it, but I sort of felt, no, I need to keep this to myself. This is my baby, and being very almost introspective. I think it's interesting because we just talked about how you engage with VCs. It's really important to grow your community, talk to people. People are there to help and share. People want percentage and cuts, and they want to see, you know, they want to see financial success out of things. But, you know, if you've got a good business, believe in it, and that will, through the magic of osmosis, be shared by others around you. And you should never be sort of reluctant to share and talk to people. That would be my takeaway.
No, that is interesting. And then I suppose that leads us actually, before we talk more about what you're doing outside of Maddyness, I'm curious. You know, I really, as I've said, I really like Maddyness UK and what you've done there, and I'm just like curious, where do you see Maddyness in 5 years? What's the sort of golden goose that you know you and your colleagues in France are looking to sort of build?
I think very simply, I think we want to be the absolute leader in France. I think we'd still like to be perceived as a challenger in the UK and across Europe. And I think to do that, I think we'd want to be opening maybe 2 to 3 more offices around Europe. Want to scale the team, right? Again, a good bit of advice for founders. You're only as good as your team. They are the most important people. So we would want to, you know, build on the great team that we have and bring in more people. The more people you have, the more capacity. And
do you find it hard to find the right people?
Only because it distracts from, only because it adds to another layer to the amount of work I need to do every day. It is a time-consuming process. We've made 2 appointments during lockdown. One an intern, one a full-time in Florence and Kirsty, respectively. And it's very easy for me to say now that it was absolutely super easy. And that's based on having 2 fantastic recruits. The reality was actually, it was really stressful. It was really, you know, LinkedIn we used for the internship, and we had over 100 applicants within a very small period of time. And then for the full-time head of content, we did struggle actually, and then we used a platform called Juggle Jobs, currently on Crowdcube, and we've written about them on Maddyness. It was again this idea, this nice sort of this world connecting,
full circle.
and great, exactly, great platform, great candidates. Looking back, I think we had a short list of 4, and they would have all been credible candidates. So, you know, I think there's a lot of talent out there. But yeah, recruiting during lockdown, I didn't enjoy.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks for that. And then, so you have the barn, you have the small family. You know, Maddyness seems to take up a lot of your time, but surely you spend a lot outside of it with the family. And any hobbies or any sort of things that you're learning to do in the country that, you know, are newsworthy, that we can talk about, that aren't illegal?
We're very lucky in that we are surrounded by beautiful countryside. So we not that long ago, I was in Harlesden, and our trips involved going to Roundwood Park and only Roundwood Park. And if I'm honest, the level of adventure there got quite limited. Here we have beautiful countryside to walk in, and we are sort of I mean, I know everyone's going on walks. So we if there's snow and fields and snowmen and horses. On a domestic level, I am learning to do electrics because it's a very expensive thing to have someone come and do your electrics. And I'm convinced that if I stare at the wires and the plugs long enough, I can map them in my head. And then with lots of post-it notes, I can work out what does what. And then I know how to turn the electrics off and I can start fiddling around with them.
The main question here, do you have a electric volt tester to make sure that you've turned it off before you reach your hand in there? Is it actually dead or not?
I do not, but it's my birthday soon and I feel like someone's definitely going to buy me one.
Maybe it'll be
actually, I think what you just described, David, with your skill of looking at wires and how to build them is perhaps a possible UK hardware unicorn could be in the building. You know, you should try and take some investment for your new ability.
I would love the investments.
And where are you reading up on this skill of wiring?
You know what we're doing is very clever. We get tradesmen round to price up jobs, and while they're here, I ask them tactical questions. Like, the green one is the earth, isn't it? And I know if you're using a nice industrial exposed metal light switch, you have to connect this bit to that bit. And they go, yeah, that's right.
Very clever.
Unless they're 2 moves ahead of you and they're giving you bad advice, so you need to call them back.
Yes, that is a possibility. We'll deal with that in 2 moves time.
And also, let's hope none of them watch this podcast before they come and see you.
That's true. Yes, David, from an undisclosed address somewhere in West Berkshire. It's something. It's something I think we can tie back to kind of my sort of feelings on trends and changes. As you say, you know, I've got a young family, a small family, doesn't feel small, 3 kids, 2 dogs, rabbits and guinea pigs. I think there's going to be a growth in... Have we got
an arc there as well?
Not yet. Not yet.
So it wasn't Jesus look, it was a Noah look.
It was a Noah look, yeah. Some days I wish an ark would come knocking and transport some of the menagerie away. No, I think there'll be a almost a kind of a renaissance of skill-based work, of artisanship, of trade. You know, I do think it's been lovely actually spending time at the weekend with the kids on a house project, right? Getting them to do, you know, play their part in insulating the loft or whatever it is that we're doing, but getting them involved and making and doing, I think they're sort of skills that I believe people will need to get through the future, because, you know, as we've seen, jobs can disappear very quickly. Industries can disappear very quickly.
Stark, isn't it? Really stark.
It is.
Okay, and then we always ask this. It's like the signature way we're ending our VODs. You know, the viewing at the moment. You watching anything super good on Amazon or Netflix or any of the other streaming channels, or is it just walks in the country?
I know we've got Netflix. Interesting, when we moved in, we didn't, for some reason, something went wrong with Sky, so we went about a month without Sky. So we got Now TV, which is a great service. And I didn't realize until like a week in, but we had access to all Sky movie channels that we would never normally have had. So I took a bit of time watching some of the kind of big movies that I had missed from the last few years.
For instance?
Which was, for instance, Joker. I hadn't seen Joker, and the latest Tarantino, which I got so excited about and then lost interest quite
Once
early.
Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll need to read
it. Gotta stick with it to the end.
Okay.
I think actually I watched that as well, and I was you know, doing the usual, you know, 15 pints at home one night every a week, and you know, and then you know, you kind of like usually wake up the following morning, and you, even with drinking 15 pints at home, I still recollect what actually happened in the movie. But with that one, I had no recollection whatsoever. It was just like a hangover from
it all makes sense at the end. You got to finish it. That's the clue.
I'll have to go back. I did discover, and I thought this was the sort of thing you could only watch if you lived in America, Forged in Fire. I think it's on the Discovery Channel or one of the National Geographic. American.
Tell us more.
Sorry?
Tell us more. I don't know anything about that.
It is men who can make weapons out of metal. So blacksmiths. And they make all sorts of amazing swords and daggers, and then have 3 very charismatic judges. I mean, it's a bit like Bake Off, but with swords.
If you like that,
an extension of your wiring.
Well, yeah. Listen, I think the initial cost of getting a forge and the tools is a little bit too much for what would probably end up in a very
burning the barn down.
Well, that too.
If you like that one, that's you know, maybe a little more family friendly as well, is Blown Away on Netflix. I don't know if you've watched that one.
No.
It's a competitive glass blowing TV show. 2 seasons. I loved it.
I am writing a note.
I binged it.
I was going on a walk instead of that one.
This is epic. No, it's really, it's very involved, and some of the stuff they come up with is pretty astounding. It's worth a watch, even like 1 or 2 episodes.
Right. I think you need to have a section on Maddyness of top readers viewing. You know, submit your viewing preferences. There you go. That's a new little section.
We did it in the first lockdown. We did an article of the kind of top series, and my input was It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I think I probably
you just
watched.
The magic words. I'm currently rewatching it now for like the 15th time.
Oh, love it.
So
love it.
Okay. All right. Well,
my wife can't stand it. She says they're just yelling at each other the whole time. I'm like, yeah.
Oh,
that's the point. It's like
offensive, unpleasant watching, but I feel very connected and close to those people.
Yeah. So that one and Curb Your Enthusiasm, right? Same sort of bucket. Love them both. It's so funny.
Okay, tell us more. I don't know either of these things. What's it?
Curb Your Enthusiasm is is Larry David, one of the writers of Seinfeld, and it's about him going about his everyday. It's him playing Larry David, but obviously he gets into all these scenarios, and it involves a lot of yelling, and it's hilarious. And then It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's a crew of like 4 or 5 people, and basically they destroy everything and everybody around them with their shenanigans. Both very funny.
So one for the kids?
No.
Okay, on that amusing ending, well, I found it a very amusing ending to the podcast. David, I'd like to free you to go to your lunchtime duties at the family restaurant, and also say thank you very much for all of the great answers, insight, and openness to show us the world of Maddyness. I think you're doing a fantastic job there. I really enjoy and honestly read nearly every day all of the content, and occasionally remind you when maybe the website's not working. I think it was only one occasion though.
Yes.
Yeah, look, just keep up the great work, mate, and I'm really proud of us working together, and hope that continues as we move forward into 2021. And then Anthony, I don't know if you've got any passing words for...
No, just echoing the sentiments of Chris there.
Well, listen, then from my side, thank you for the invite. Looking forward to continuing to work with you guys, and you know, I think now is the time to start speculatively thinking about what we're going to be doing when we can meet up.